Katie had always worn the mantle of moral compass at Forrester Creations with quiet, almost disarming poise, so when she marched into the executive conference room that humid Tuesday afternoon, portfolio clutched like an indictment. Blue eyes blazing with indignation, no one took her sudden ferocity lightly. In a single breath, she dismantled Daphne's gilded veneer, revealing ledger entries doctored to siphon charitable event funds, travel itineraries double-billed to obscure clandestine rendezvous, and, most damning of all, a back-channel trail leading directly to Steffy Forrester's private discretionary account. Hope Spencer, already tense after weeks of whispered speculation about Carter Walton's abrupt coolness toward her, felt the floor tilt. It was not merely Daphne's misdeeds on display. Katie's crisp narration made plain that Daphne had been acting at Steffy's behest, orchestrating a wedge between Hope and Carter so Steffy could keep Forrester's co-chief counsel firmly in her pocket. The implication was brutal. Steffy feared Hope's influence over Carter and, by extension, her own precarious grip on the company's stewardship while Ridge drifted between artistic reverie and boardroom fatigue. Seconds after Katie's final damning slide, silence thundered around the mahogany table, broken only by the soft hiss of the projector cooling and the faint flutter of Hope's pulse in her ears. Steffy rose slowly, a calculating calm in her posture, and offered a rebuttal wrapped in corporate sophistry claims of misinterpretation, of Daphne acting far beyond any mandate, of rival firms eager to exploit perceived rifts, but the attempt rang hollow. Hope's disappointment ignited into fury. She crossed the room, every inch of her lithe frame rigid with betrayal, and delivered a stinging slap that echoed off beveled glass walls, drawing a gasp from onlookers and a livid flush to Steffy's cheek. "I gave you the benefit of every doubt," Hope hissed, voice trembling yet resolute, "and you repaid me by poisoning the one relationship you couldn't bully into submission." Steffy's retort, something about family loyalty and safeguarding legacy, dissolved beneath the glare of Hope's conviction. In that heartbeat, Hope committed herself to a course as ruthless as any Forrester maneuver. Steffy would learn that destroying lives for leverage had consequences beyond temporary boardroom victories. Outside, flashbulbs from gossip site paparazzi already clustered in the lobby foretold how quickly this feud would detonate across social feeds. Inside, Hope pivoted toward Carter, meeting his conflicted gaze with a vow that left even Katie momentarily speechless. She would not merely salvage their fractured bond, she would weaponize it. Hope revealed the pregnancy she had concealed out of uncertainty and fragile hope, a life barely budding within her now repurposed as both shield and blade. If Carter failed to reclaim the company's Steffy, so jealously ring-fenced by legal coup or strategic attrition, Hope would terminate the pregnancy, denying Carter his unborn child and herself any semblance of sentimental retreat. Shock rippled through the room. Carter's usually measured baritone fractured into a husky plea for private discussion, but Hope's ultimatum was public by design, a gauntlet hurled where witnesses could attest to its unflinching terms. Steffy attempted to mask the flicker of alarm darting across her eyes, yet Hope saw it, the first hairline crack in Steffy's iron facade. Carter spent that night in his corner office, city lights bleeding through floor-to-ceiling windows like neon confessions, spreadsheets sprawled across his desk in chaotic constellations of profit margins, compliance matrices, and decades of Forrester tax declarations. Every line of code in the financial software he ran seemed a moral referendum. Prove Steffy's misconduct, dethrone her and Ridge, seize the helm, or forfeit fatherhood before it began. He recalled the soft thrill of Hope's early laughter, the first time their hands brushed over sample sketches, the fragile confidence she'd entrusted to him. Now her memory came with the sharp scent of hospital antiseptic and the imagined silence of a sonogram room left forever dark. By dawn, Carter isolated discrepancies buried beneath legitimate returns. shell subsidiaries in benign jurisdictions, charitable deductions inflated by art valuations convenient to Ridge's reputation, and, crowning it all, a complex cascade of deferred revenue tricks that, should the IRS scrutinize, would paint Steffi and Ridge as architects of an aggressive tax avoidance empire. He encrypted files onto a thumb drive small enough to swallow but weighty as a confession, slipped it into his jacket, and felt something inside him calcify into resolve. In the showroom downstairs, mannequins frozen in haute couture poise mocked his moral turmoil, beauty masking artifice, glamour cloaking greed. How fitting that the line between aesthetics and ethics blurred most at Forrester. He arranged an off-site board meeting under pretext of routine audit review, circulated agendas light on detail, and alerted a trusted IRS contact disguised in his phone as C. Walters, an anagram of his own name, insurance that if Steffi smelled mutiny, the authorities would already be circling. Meanwhile, Hope retreated not into quiet anticipation, but into a relentless campaign of psychological warfare, appearing at Steffi's favored cafes, front row at design previews. Her presence a constant reminder that every accolade Steffi enjoyed was contingent upon Carter's still unstated findings. Gossip columns salivated, tabloids coined, Slapgate. Brooke Logan, wired on espresso and worry, confronted her daughter in the dim sanctuary of Il Giardino's back patio, the hum of Malibu waves barely soothing the tension. Brooke pleaded for diplomacy, reminding Hope that vengeance corrodes, that severing Ridge's bond to her through collateral damage would doom Brooke's final shot at reconciliation. But Hope, eyes shining with tears she refused to shed, countered that love built on capitulation was no love worth craving. Brooke left in stung silence, recognizing in Hope the same defiant fire she'd once brandished against Stephanie Forrester, only this time aimed inward, against blood and legacy alike. Days later, Carter unveiled his evidence to a stunned board, pages of annotated ledgers projected onto a white wall like forensic art, each red box a heartbeat closer to scandal. Ridge, summoned from a sketching retreat in Big Sur, arrived to see decades of entrepreneurial mythos exposed as precarious sleight of hand. Steffi argued corporate necessity, global competition, the slippery ethics of multinational fashion houses, but Carter's prosecutorial cadence left little room for romanticized capitalism. He offered a simple bargain. Ridge and Steffi would step aside temporarily, vesting interim control in him, while an internal task force handpicked and answerable solely to the new CEO cooperated with federal auditors to negotiate penalties and preserve jobs. The alternative was a public IRS indictment capable of gutting brand equity overnight. Ridge, stunned, glanced at Brooke in the gallery. Her sympathetic wince felt like betrayal. Faced with annihilation or abdication, Ridge capitulated. Steffi's stony nod masked a scream. Cameras outside captured the departure of Forrester royalty under flashbulbs that rendered their misery cinematic. That night, Hope met Carter on the rooftop terrace above the boutique flagship, Los Angeles flickering beneath like a restless sea of consequence. He told her the company was theirs to reshape, that the baby's future was secure, that Steffi's reign was over for now. But the triumph that should have ignited celebration tasted ash bitter. Hope saw exhaustion lining Carter's eyes, a hollowness anchored by the knowledge that their love had been reforged as a weapon. She whispered gratitude and traced his knuckles where red pen calluses had blossomed from endless forensic notation, yet inside she wondered whether any victory extracted through coercion could ever feel like home. Downstairs, seamstresses pinned muslin prototypes for the next couture line, unaware their livelihoods now balanced on non-disclosure agreements and deferred prosecution negotiations. Across town, Brooke packed away the last photo of her and Ridge together on the Aspen slopes, Hope's scorched earth campaign having incinerated even ember-sized chances of reunion. Ridge could not forgive Brooke's silence during Carter's putsch, interpreting it as complicity. Katie, watching families fracture in the wake of her revelation, questioned whether truth itself could be toxic once weaponized. And Steffi, stripped of title but not tenacity, plotted from a minimalist Pacific Palisades rental, marshalling contacts at international fashion consortiums, preparing counter-litigation, vowing that whatever Hope and Carter built atop the rubble of her legacy would stand only long enough for her to reclaim it with interest. Yet the most delicate storm brewed within Hope herself. In quiet moments she pressed palm against the small swell beneath her ribcage, feeling not triumph but trembling uncertainty. She had saved her child, seized her destiny, and still sensed the universe poised to extract a price she could not yet fathom, perhaps paid in Carter's disillusionment. Perhaps in the future gaze of a son or daughter who might one day learn of ultimata issued before their first heartbeat was heard. And so the lights of Forrester Creations burned long into dawn, illuminating a dynasty reconfigured by betrayal, ambition, and desperate love, while in every shadow lingered the truth that victories forged in resentment invite wars without end. The air in the cliffside Forrester mansion seemed permanently thick with worry now that Liam Spencer had moved in under the guise of needing a safe place to recover. Yet from the moment his overnight bag crossed the threshold, Steffi felt her own heart split between loyalty to her husband and an aching instinct to protect the father of her daughter. She reminded Finn again and again that Liam's brain tumor had progressed unpredictably, that the headaches came in blinding waves and the dizziness struck without warning, but none of those medical realities insulated her marriage from the raw, jealous questions lurking behind Finn's strained smiles. Finn had tried to swallow his uneasiness. He even set out an extra toothbrush for Liam in the guest bathroom and scheduled late shifts at the hospital so the house would feel less crowded. But as evenings slipped into early mornings, he noticed how effortlessly Liam slid back into the rhythms of life with Steffi, the way they traded memories over espresso, how she finished his sentences when he searched for a word dulled by fatigue, the small, wordless touches on a forearm or a shoulder that spoke of an intimacy Finn had never been invited to share. Day by day, that closeness deepened, fed by the grim knowledge that a mass of malignant cells inside Liam's skull could steal him away at any moment. And in the quiet corners of the house, Steffi began offering what she told herself were gestures of comfort, adjusting a pillow behind his neck, guiding his hand so he would not miss a step on the staircase, brushing a stray lock of hair from his fevered brow, yet each gesture sharpened Finn's fear that love dressed up as compassion was still love. All the same, and that fear fermented into anger until it pulsed like a second heartbeat. He told Steffi he trusted her, but his voice cracked. He told himself Liam was too weak to court trouble, but then he would remember that Liam had fought for Steffi before and, tumor or not, might fight again. He even forced a laugh one night, insisting to Steffi that the world would not end if Liam kissed her, yet when the words left his lips he tasted iron, because saying them aloud conjured the scene so vividly that it felt prophetic. And so the moment arrived more swiftly than anyone expected. Afternoon sunlight slanting across the living room floor, Steffi leading Liam to the sofa after another staggering bout of vertigo, her fingertips steadying his jaw as she dabbed at the sweat beading near his temple. Liam's gratitude flickered in watery blue eyes, and with a fragile, trembling smile that looked like a resignation to fate, he pressed his mouth to hers in a kiss that was gentle yet unmistakably charged, a silent confession that none of his failing neurons could scramble. It lasted no longer than a heartbeat, but that single forbidden beat echoed through the hallway just as Finn rounded the corner, clutching the stethoscope he had forgotten to drop off at the clinic. The sight rooted him in place. the stethoscope falling with a dull thud that jolted Steffi backward while Liam, confused, pulled away and tried to stand. Shock buckled Finn's restrained anger, hurt. The betrayal of imagined vows shattered all at once, and in a flash he crossed the room, fists tight, voice raw with disbelief, demanding an explanation neither of them could convincingly supply. Liam, already reeling from a sudden spike of pain at the base of his skull, lifted his palms in an unsteady apology, but the gesture only fanned the storm inside Finn, who lunged forward. Shoulder muscles coiled and mind clouded by a primal need to defend the sanctity of his marriage. His knuckles met Liam's cheekbone with a crack that resounded like snapping timber, and time itself fractured. Steffi's gasp, the spray of crimson across Liam's lip, the way his pupils blew wide with terror before the tumor seized its opportunity and yanked him into darkness. Liam crumpled, knees folding, consciousness flickering out even before his head thudded against the oak floor. Instinct eclipsed everything as Steffi dropped to her knees, cradling Liam's skull, fingers searching for the pulse that fluttered far too faintly beneath clammy skin. Finn knelt, horror corroding his anger, medical training roaring to the surface. He pressed trembling fingertips to the carotid, counted sluggish beats, tilted Liam's head to open the airway. Steffi's voice trembled as she called emergency services, each word a plea wrapped in guilt and dread. They waited, minutes stretching like hours, Steffi whispering reassurances Liam could not hear, Finn applying gentle pressure to where his own fist had blossomed a brutal bruise. Sirens wailed up the winding drive and uniforms flooded the foyer, paramedics stabilizing vital signs, slipping an oxygen mask over slack lips, sliding Liam onto a stretcher while the monitor's erratic beeping underscored every breath. Steffi insisted on riding in the ambulance, fingers laced with Liam's as the vehicle lurched toward the hospital. Finn followed in his car, sirens wailing inside his mind louder than those on the road, each flash of red and blue reflecting off the windshield a reminder that one reckless punch might have irreversibly tipped the scales against a tumor already poised to kill. In the trauma bay, doctors crowded around Liam, scanning, intubating, drilling burr holes to relieve pressure as Finn stood scrubbed in at the edge, contributing rapid-fire history, cursing himself under his breath. Steffi watched through the observation glass, nails digging crescents into her palms, tears carving silent trails while she replayed the kiss, the punch, the collapse in an endless loop. Hours later, a neurosurgeon emerged with words that felt like a verdict rendered in slow motion. Liam had slipped into a coma, the tumors swelling, exacerbated by the trauma, threatened vital centers. Immediate surgery offered a chance, but only a narrow one, and even survival carried no guarantee of waking. The weight of that uncertainty pinned Steffi's lungs in her chest, yet she squared her shoulders, resolved to authorize the procedure, whispering to the surgeon that Liam deserved every sliver of hope. Finn, shattered by remorse, offered his own signature beside hers, feeling the ink bleed through his pride because nothing mattered now except undoing the damage his jealousy had wrought. In the waiting room, dusk bled into dawn, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while coffee cooled untouched on side tables. Ridge called, Brooke texted, Hope left voicemail after voicemail, but Steffi heard none of it, her gaze fixed on the operating room doors. At last they swung open and the surgeon, cap in hand, reported that the tumor mass had been partially resected, intracranial pressure reduced, bleeding controlled, but Liam remained critical. The next 24 hours would determine the rest of his life. Relief and dread coiled together in Steffi's gut. She thanked the team, then turned to Finn, whose red-rimmed eyes begged forgiveness without words. She wanted to rage, to scream that his fists had stolen choices from all of them, yet she recognized the mirror of her own guilt in his face, the guilt of secrecy, of letting comfort morph into something dangerously close to desire. So she reached for his hand, not in absolution but in acknowledgement that they had crossed a line together and could only cross back together if Liam's heart kept beating. They stepped into Liam's ICU room where machines performed the symphony of life. Ventilator wheeze, monitor beep, infusion pump hiss, each note reminding them how thin the thread had become. Steffi stroked Liam's bandaged head, whispered promises she could not guarantee, while Finn adjusted drips, checked reflexes, whispered apologies into sleeping ears. Outside, the first sunrise since the accident painted Malibu gold, indifferent to human grief, yet inside the hospital love, fear, and consequence tangled so tightly that no scalpel could separate them. If Liam awakened, he would awaken to a world irrevocably altered, a world where a kiss he barely remembered had nearly cost him his life, where the man who saved strangers had nearly killed a friend, and where the woman at the center of it all would have to choose whether compassion could coexist with passion, whether loyalty to family could eclipse the complex history written in every shared heartbeat. And so the question hung heavier than sterile air. Would Liam's eyelids flutter open and reveal pupils bright with recognition, or would silence fall as the final answer, leaving Steffi and Finn to navigate a future forever haunted by that single, devastating punch?